welcome back to the Solo RolePlayers Podcast. Today on the show, I have what is technically the very first return guest, which makes her an official friend of the show. Tana Pigeon, welcome back to the Solo RolePlayers Podcast. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you, PJ. It's wonderful to be here. I was looking forward to coming back because I know at the end of our last conversation, we're like, let's do this again. And Here we are doing it again.
And I'm so glad we did. I left that last interview with so many more topics and questions that I wanted to talk about. Today, though, we're not going to have an interview. Today, we're going to have a bit of a chat about a particular topic on the internet at large. I always see people asking this question, and I rarely see a satisfying answer come up, which is all about how to play published adventures solo.
Yes.
Now, I know you have some experience with this. We did talk about it briefly on the interview that we did, but since then, you released, I think it was the second to last issue of Mythic magazine that you released, issue number 50, where you talk about yet another way, or a new way, to play published adventures. It's called Deconstructing Prepared Adventures for Solo Play. My first question to you is, why on earth would people want to play a published adventure solo? Something that is designed for group play. Why would people want to play something published solo?
Right. I know. It sounds counterintuitive a little bit at first for the solo community. But as you said, there's a thirst out there for it. And I think there's two reasons, honestly. It's modules, modules are such are a big part of the role-playing landscape, right? It's a huge part. And so it's kind of a bummer just to say as a solo player, that's all cut off from us. But then also it's how do you approach it? As you say, they're intrinsically social. And as soon as you start reading it, you've spoiled it, but you can't play it without reading it. And so there's natural barriers to it, but there's all that juicy content in there. It is so close, right?
I know. It's all hovering there. There's all this written stuff and surprises and adventures and traps and all this stuff is out there.
Yes, so close yet so far away.
Yeah. And that's been exactly my experience. I haven't tried a lot to play published adventures. My most successful playing, and I've now, actually since last time we talked, I've played a whole lot more games on the show, for the show, but still my most successful solo role-playing and most enjoyable has been just playing a book that was not at all designed for solo with Mythic. Big sandbox game, and that has been my most satisfying and successful stuff. I have since, however, tried a couple of published things, and most recently, I was playing Forbidden Lands. Have you played Forbidden Lands, or are you familiar with it?
I haven't played it, but I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, so something that Forbidden Lands does is it has these adventure sites, which is essentially like a point crawl within a site kind of a thing. So it's not as text heavy as a lot of published adventures. Presumably the D&D stuff, I don't know it. I've never played one, but I can picture them being blocks of text, going exactly one way, and from what I've heard from other people. But this point crawl thing did seem to lend itself a bit more to a solo experience, and so I tried it out on the show. On the extra bonus episodes I do for the patrons, and I got about halfway through, and I was having about half a good time, right? And so I was sort of following some amalgamation of advice that I'd read from Mythic and from talking to people like Deborah from Geek Gamers and a few other bits and pieces, and just kind of skim reading a little bit, not looking too far ahead, making decisions in advance, which is something that I know comes from DM Yourself. Also worth checking out if you haven't already, listeners. And it was good. It was nice to experience those things, but I still felt like I knew what was coming, and I still felt kind of pushed into a particular path, Even when I would sort of skim something and thought, oh, that looks important, I'll stop reading. In my head, I couldn't help but know that if the players look at the catapult, then I'm like, okay, well, we better look at the catapult now and then find out what happens,
Right.
What I did for the second half of it is I had a bit of a think. I came a bit back to Mythic, and I started then treating the introduction to the site, or the introduction to the area in the site, as setting a scene, and then testing that scene. And that already yielded better results, I thought, because I still wasn't sure what was going to happen. The information was still there. I still got to play through it, but I also wasn't sure if and when it was going to completely change.
Right.
In your article, you talk about two main ways. The old way that you've written about, which you called subvert the known. I feel like my approach in that case was more akin to the subvert the known. You have the pre-written stuff there worked out, but you then ask Mythic, or ask the question, is this actually what happened?
Right.
Is that a fair assessment of what the subvert the known method is?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. Like you say, it's trying to you can't help but know what's up next in the module. So the subvert the known solution of that is whatever the module says isn't actually true in the adventure until it happens. And so everything in there is just a possibility. And so that's subverting it. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it'll be different, maybe it won't happen at all. You don't know.
Mm-hmm. As you so eloquently summed up in the article, you know what you know, but what you know, you only think you know, and it may be wrong.
Yes.
Which I thought was very nice. In your opinion, what are some of the strengths and weaknesses of that approach? Like, why take that approach, and what are some of the drawbacks of it?
Well, I think, with this whole drive to play adventures and modules solo is kind of like this holy grail where you're trying to get you want that experience you feel when you play a social game. And so that's where the structure of the module comes in, right? Like, it's not just the content in there, but it's the structure. And so maintaining the structure helps maintain like this adventure narrative, which is part of it. But as you say, just by flipping through it, we know what the narrative is. We know what comes up next. So to me, subverting the known, it's real similar to the problem of player knowledge versus character knowledge, which exists in solo role playing, outside of modules. And I've always maintained that the solution to that is, as you quoted me, that you know what you know, but you don't really know it until it happens. So this whole subverting the known thing, it's to me, like you can't escape knowing stuff in the module. So let's just accept that. There's no way around it, right? So let's discard the idea of that we're going to get an experience that's precisely like social play. Let's just forget about that. So we have now a brand new way of playing. It's not social role play. It's not even solo role play. It's something else. It's like this hybrid. And so by, I think, embracing this concept of subverting the known, we're actually playing in a new way. And I think that works better than trying to replicate another experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So accepting that this is different, which I think is already part of solo role playing, right? Yeah. I mean, if you really want to get into solo role playing and get the most out of it, you really have to accept that it is a different thing. And for some people like me, a better thing, but you have to accept that it is a different thing. I think that's good advice.
It is, and there's kind of two stages to it. Like even with solo, when you first start playing, your first impulse is to emulate what you're familiar with in social role play, and to try to get that exact same feeling, and then eventually get to the point where, like you say, you're embracing it as a different experience. And I think the same thing needs to happen with playing modules for solo. We need, like, first impulse is we want it to be just like the social experience, and we want to play it as it's written. But I think as we move away from that, there's actually more opportunity in modules.
Do you play published modules yourself often?
I wouldn't say often, but I like to do it. My best experience in it was playing Tomb of Annihilation in D&D 5e, and that's a huge. That's like a 250-page campaign meant to take you from level 1 to level 10. So it's a huge module. I did that on purpose because I wanted to solo play something huge and complicated, and it was fantastic. And I did the subvert the known approach, and so the story meandered pretty far away from the original story.
Mm-hmm. Could you just for our listeners who want to try the subvert the known method, could you, using that D&D adventure as an example, could you give just a bit of an idea of how you might approach that, or how you did approach that?
Yeah, it's pretty much like what I've written about, where I took the intro of the adventure as is. So I went with that, which got the thing going, establishing scenes. Mythic took over at that part. So making scenes, everything's very solo, just like solo role play at that point. When I would hit sections of the book that had descriptions, like for instance, there's a town you start off in on this island, and there's important figures in the town. And that's when I started to subvert the known by asking questions. Like I would say a fake question like, okay, is the person who is like in charge of this area actually in charge of this area? And do they exist in my game? Yes or no? And if it's yes, I would go along with how the book was written. If it was no, that person was entirely gone, and maybe some other figure took their place or something.
Would you then, sorry to interrupt, but would you then roll up a brand new imagined character, or would you pull someone else out of the adventure at that point?
I think I'm trying to remember, but more likely I would create a brand new character to fill the gap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so there was quite a bit of that. Yeah. And I mean, so that's pretty much how I made my way through the adventure. And it's such a big adventure that the further you go and the more changes you make, the more varied it gets and the more it diverges from the source material, right?
Yeah, it's making me sweat already.
But it's great. I mean, I got to this point later where my character's in the jungle, and she spent a lot of time in the jungle, much more than the original adventure entails, because I kept meeting these characters who were like very minor characters in the module itself, but they became really important characters in my adventure because Mythic was giving them all kinds of. So there's all kinds of hijinks going on in the jungle that I never even made it like to the tomb itself because the jungle had so much going on in it. And that's kind of where Mythic, it took it in an entirely different direction. And so I got the benefit of the content of the module. So that's where the module came into it. And I got the benefit of the Solo RolePlay where it took it into a whole different story.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that if I play it again, I'll get a different story yet again.
Now, that is an interesting point. It means that with the subvert the known method, and presumably the deconstruct the known method, as we'll get to, it makes modules replayable.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes, it does.
That's
you get the
cool.
same tone and a lot of the same elements, but a second run through, it might be completely different.
Yeah, and I can imagine it being really fun thinking, this big thing that got me last time, I wonder if that's going to be there this time. Almost like what are they called? Like a roguelike.
Yeah, like that first time through, I had a real problem with zombies in the jungle. It like turned into, there was like a whole almost zombie apocalypse aspect to it. And like that just grew organically out of Mythic. I'm guessing, a second time around that may not even be an issue, but who knows?
Yeah. And are you doing full Mythic, full chaos factor, character lists, all that kind of thing?
Yeah, whole 9 yards.
Mm. Did you find that you had to intentionally try and pull yourself back to some of the material written in the book, or you were just happy to let it go?
There was a bit of tug of war sometimes. Like I would find myself referring to the book and then kind of getting into it and finding myself like kind of dragged for like wanting to do what the book says. And then I'd have to remind myself, oh, wait a minute, I should test that.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I would say that's kind of a drawback. I didn't like that. In hindsight, I didn't like it.
The fact that you were being drawn back into what was there and not being let free.
Yeah. I mean, it's a testament to the adventure that it was doing that, but that really wasn't what I was looking for. So there was a little bit of tension there. of that, which is one of the reasons why the whole, deconstruct thing I came up with was to try to blow that up.
Yeah. Or put it, what was it? Set the blender to frappe or something you said?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Just before we get to that, one more thing I wanted to ask about your experience with the big adventure is, did you go through and read large chunks beforehand of the adventure, or did you go sort of page by page as your characters were going through it?
Yeah, I just went page by page. No, I really don't like preparing. I don't like reading ahead of time. So no, I just kind of read the intro. I didn't even read the whole intro. I just kind of skimmed it and then just started.
Yeah. For people who want to try this, maybe an important piece of advice then is to, I think people get stuck. Like you said, you were being drawn back into what was in the book. But at the same time, you said you didn't even read the whole intro. So just allowing yourself to read through, skim through, and then let the ideas bubble up and think, oh, wouldn't that be cool? And then just sort of roll with it. You think that's sort of good advice?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, that's fun in its own right. It's not like I didn't read the book. I kind of skimmed through it and I flipped through it. But I didn't really study it. And then when I'm playing, I'm kind of reading while I'm playing, which is neat. The book's full of great stuff. So that's kind of like what I was saying before, is that this isn't like social role. It's not like if a live GM was taking me through it. And it wasn't like solo role play. It was its own thing. So that was fun. I mean, the aspect of it was fun.
Yeah.
And getting pulled into the narrative isn't a bad thing either. I mean, aside from the content in the book, one of the things that we want modules for is the narrative storyline, right? That kind of structure to take us along. And yeah, it is kind of linear and it does kind of control us a little bit, but that's actually part of the content of the book. However, that's one philosophy, right? And the deconstructing idea is purposefully getting rid of that narrative structure entirely.
The blender angle.
The blender.
Let's dive into the deconstruct the known. And this is what prompted me to get in touch with you again when I started reading this article and thought, this makes way more sense to me and is more appealing to me than the subvert the known method that I had tried before and was reasonably happy with and would and will continue to try. But this looked like something new and something exciting. And when I read it, I did get bells ringing of little bits and pieces that you said in our last interview. I think you said at one point, hey, you can even use a whole book as a table, and just roll on that. And I think that's what caught me. And I remembered you saying that. And I thought, this is interesting. Not only are we going to talk through what that is, I mean, mostly you, not only are we going to talk through what deconstruct the known is, but we're going to do a little bit of a live example of this.
Nice.
You said you don't like to do too much prep or too much reading. I am entirely in that camp as well. And so we have a randomly chosen, freely available adventure. I can't even remember what it's for. We'll come to that when we get to it. And we're going to do just a surface level example sort of run through of that. But before we do, tell us a little bit about what the idea is behind the deconstruct the known technique.
Okay. So like I was saying about earlier about how solo role players come from a traditional background, we try to do things as we learn them and then we move away from them, right? That's I had the same process when trying to come up with how to use solo modules. So when coming up with the method I have in GME second edition, the deconstruct or the subvert the known, I wanted to maintain the narrative structure of the adventures because I felt I should. Now there was a part of me that it's there. Yeah, why throw it away? But there was a part of me that wanted to tear it all up, and I was like, no, I can't do that. That's going to piss people off.
Yeah.
That isn't what they want.
Exactly
right?
the reason that you should, right?
Yeah. So now I've gotten to that point, right? Yeah. You know what? Yeah. Let's, I can see myself trying to move away, like separating from the traditional. So that's how we got to this point. Deconstructing unknown is, like you say, putting the whole adventure in a blender and hitting a frappe. Just tear it all apart. Forget the narrative structure. Treat the book like it's just a giant, it's a meaning table. The book itself is a meaning table, and all the content in there is just like how on a meaning table you roll a single word. We're treating the book as rolling a single concept, a single paragraph, even artwork. Anything in the book is fair game. So, on the assumption that the creator of that book infused it with ideas and contents and atmosphere, and that's going to come through. Like if it's like, I think this adventure is like a pirate thing or something. So I'm guessing there's like a lot of pirate stuff in there. The adventure itself will be weighted toward that. I mean, if the adventure is like 30% pirate oriented, then the book as a table will lean toward pirate stuff, right? It'll naturally take care of itself. Plus all the juicy content in there will come out. It'll come out in different order, and we'll create our own narrative from that content. So this is me getting rid of like dropping the narrative structure that's established and treating the book as a table and seeing what we get.
Yeah.
Which I feel is like where this is the natural progression of where all this should be going.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really think that's fantastic. And something you said that really stood out to me in the last time we got together was you said that if you use a book as a table, it is naturally weighted towards the things that the author thought were more important because they put more words into those concepts and those encounters and those things.
Right.
And that makes an awful lot of sense to me. And I'm so, one of the many things I love about Mythic is the weighted nature of it. And I really, for whatever reason, and maybe it's just me, I really am not interested in an oracle roll that has an exactly equal chance of everything, you know? I want to feel like there is a weighting there somewhere working in the background against my understanding of the probability.
Right.
And I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, and books naturally do that. You know, any book will naturally do that.
Yeah, and I hadn't thought of that concept. Brilliant. Let's do this.
Okay.
We are... Now, I need to figure out how to... this is a first for me. This is the first time I've actually looked at a PDF of a game. I like to keep everything analog. So I need to learn how to share my screen.
Well, and I'm very tactile, so I've got deconstructed adventure sheet ready, which I'm just going to do by hand, fill it out. Got my adventure list, which we'll fill out. So I've got like the hard copy stuff.
Oh, this is music to my ears. This is fantastic. I assume you have dice nearby as well.
I have my dice tray ready to go.
Beautiful.
And I got a copy of Mythic right here that I'll be opening to my fate chart so we can roll anything. So I'm ready.
Just you
ready
have
to do this.
Copies of Mythic lying around, presumably.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, okay. I'm going to figure out how to share my screen, bring the adventure up, and then I have a fun little exercise. I am yet to play Pirate Borg. You're familiar with Pirate Borg?
Yes, I've never played it, but I'm familiar with it.
Excellent. And I thought it would be fun to just roll up, like we're not going to roll full characters or anything, but just roll up the outline of a character. And I was very pleased to see that on the opening cover of Pirate Borg, there is quite hilarious things about rolling up a pirate. So let's do that.
Very cool.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're not going to play through this for hours, although I absolutely could. I'm going to read the first paragraph to give a bit of a setup for what this is. I found this on oneshotadventures.com, which has a whole bunch of free adventures sorted by genre, which is really cool. And I don't actually know what game this is for, but it doesn't even matter at this point. Oh, no, it is. Look, A Crown of Feathers is a Pirate Borg adventure set in 1661, the age of piracy. But it can be easily adapted to other game systems. Excellent. So, Captain Theodosius, or Theodosius Malachi of the Morning Passage, is a sinful man. For years he's performed vile tasks for the worst governors and slavers of the Caribbean. Chief among his employers was Sir Kitts, Governor William Watts, an arrogant noble known for his greed, callousness, and poor decisions. Recently, Governor Watts is building a private estate on the southern island of Whispering City, and he asked the captain to make deliveries to it, including the high-status dead of St. Kitts, whom he promised to bury in a graveyard worthy of British nobility. Okay, so we're pirates and we have a job to bury a body. That sounds just about perfect. We're going to roll ourselves just the outline of a character each, and I would like you to roll me, please, 2 d12s, or a d12 twice.
All right. I hope I get something truly awful. 7 and 1.
So you are Samuel the Butcher.
All right.
And I am Peter Swade. Those could have been nastier names, but that's okay. Samuel the Butcher, I think, could be pretty nasty.
I like that.
Peter Swade he's a little bit silky smooth. Now, I want you to roll me now, please. Give me 4 d20 rolls, and this will tell you what you did last night.
Oh, gosh. Once again, I hope it's something truly terrible. 18.
Yes.
12.
Okay, so keep going.
Trying to read your expression. 20.
I'm trying to use all of my fingers to mark these. Yep, okay.
And 1.
Okay, so last night, through a drunken experience, married a number of wenches. You married a number of wenches in a mansion, and all of them were missing a digit or an eye. So maybe you got in a conversation about, how valuable people still are, even if they're missing a digit or an eye, and you decided to prove it by marrying all of them. I don't know.
I had quite the night.
You did have quite the night. And my night, I spent the night with my crew, tied to a spit over a fire, and ended up in debt 3d10 times 10 silver. So clearly we were having... So what was my name? I was Peter Swade. And I was clearly having some sort of bet with my crew about how long we could survive being turned over the spit over a fire. And I lost that bet, and now I owe 3d10 times 10 silver.
Well, at least I thought you were going to tell me your character died before we began, so that's an improvement.
Well, the fact that I still owe the money, I'm going to assume that I survived. Okay, so we are now looking at this book, okay? I mean, in this case, it's a PDF. I can see that it's 39 pages long. What is our first step? What do we need to do to set things up here?
Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we have to establish the adventure die. And this is just the die we roll to choose the page numbers. And it's just weighted toward the size of the book. So this is, what would you say this was, like 36
39,
pages?
40 page
39.
book.
So adventure die then is a die 10. I'm going to go ahead and mark that.
Okay. So what's the logic behind this? Is this so that you're only, like, you're pushing through the natural progress of the adventure?
Yeah, the adventure die is intended to be about a maximum of like a quarter of the book. So for instance, when you roll the first time, it should only take you up through a quarter of the book. Mm-hmm. And the idea there is that earlier stuff in the book is going to be more introductory. And so it's the deconstructed system starts off weighted toward the front of the book. Now you can quickly move through the rest of the book with the die rules, but it's intended so that the early die rules does focus on the front portions of the book.
Right.
May not necessarily happen. If you get high rolls rapidly in a row, you can take yourself pretty quickly through the book. But I wanted to be more conscious of subdividing the book instead of just hitting the whole thing at once.
Okay. So basically because the listeners can't see this, but basically in the article that you wrote in the issue number 50, it says, if your book is this number of pages or between this range of pages, use this die. this range
Right.
of pages, that die, so on.
And that's what I'm referring to here. If it's between 33 to 40 pages, you use die 10. We're at 39 pages. So die 10 is our adventure die.
Okay. What is the first thing that we do now?
Okay, we generate a first scene. Now this is where things might get a little strange. You read the prelude to the adventure. Now that's the prelude to this adventure. Deconstructing adventures doesn't necessarily use that.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing to do is basically to create our own prelude.
Okay, you should have stopped me.
No, that's good though. I was thinking about that while you're doing it, but I think it's good to establish what the prelude is supposed to be. So we know what this adventure is supposed to be, right? So let's see what our version is going to be. So that kind of gives us, it's nice to see what the difference is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So basically we just, we roll up adventure elements. And this is where we treat the book as a meaning table. So I'm just going to go ahead and start doing that. What we do is we roll anywhere from 1 to 3 adventure elements that we're going to take out of the book, and we're going to mash that together and use that to create our first scene. And if we want, we can stick with like this basic concept that the prelude has set up. But let's see what we get and see what that inspires with us. So I'm going to go ahead and roll the adventure die, and we're going to get our first adventure element. So let's see, the die 10, I roll 10. So go ahead and go to page 10, and I'm going to mark which one I rolled. Okay, so page 10, and now I'm going to roll die 6, and we're going to choose a section of that page.
Okay, so why have you chosen a D6 at this point?
Okay, so the adventure die takes us to the page, and then a D6 chooses a quadrant of the page, dividing the page into 6 quadrants just because that cuts it up pretty well. I found whether it was like 1 column, 2 column, or 3 column, or how a page is divided up, or how it's laid out, kind of dividing it into 6 equal chunks seems to hit just about all layouts.
Okay.
So for instance, I rolled a 3. So that would be the middle left.
Okay, so middle left of this page
Yes.
is this blue box here, which has a quote, "Like Malachi, you're cursed. I see it emanating from your bones. Never are you to leave the ship again, else..." And now we have a little table under here. So would we then interact with this as if we were interacting with it in the story? Would we then roll on this table, or are we taking this thing as a whole?
It's up to us. Once you roll a piece of content, you can do whatever you want with it. Let's roll. Let's see
so what makes most sense to me, what this is it has the beginning of a sentence and then 6 possible endings to that sentence. So
Okay,
let's
let's go
roll
ahead
up
and
the
do it.
possible ending.
Whoops. Just dropped my D6 on the floor. I got so excited, I flung it a little too hard. Okay, I got a 4. So what is that?
So like Malachi, you're cursed. I see it emanating from your bones. Never are you to leave the ship again, else the winds carry the cries of the damned straight to your soul, driven ye to the brink of madness.
Wow. I like that. Okay. So we're being ordered to not leave a ship. This sounds really dire. Okay. So that's our first concept.
Okay.
Now, does that to you conjure like the beginnings of an adventure alone right there, or do we need more?
Well, to me it does. I mean, to me, what I'm naturally doing is asking myself questions which immediately sort of conjure up a bit of a scene. Why are we never to leave this ship? What is going on with the ship? Is the captain leaving it and leaving us in charge of the ship, perhaps, while they go and do something important? And we are lowly, rotten pirates, and he has no choice but to leave us here and perhaps not let the prisoner escape, or let the body escape. Oh no, we decided we're not burying this body for the captain.
Well, we could.
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah, let's have it that we are tasked to bury this body in a particular place,
Okay.
and we are not to leave the ship, and we have to spend the night or multiple nights watching over this body and make sure that nothing happens to it, because it's worth more than our lives.
That makes sense. And the quote is starting off here, like Malachi. Let's say the body's Malachi.
Okay.
You're cursed. Yeah, so we're assuming this is the captain speaking to us. He's comparing us to the body, and he's saying, "You're cursed. I see it emanating from your bones." Captain doesn't like us much, so I'm guessing taking care of the body is kind of shit work that we've been given. So yeah, that's the beginning of our adventure. Then
Excellent.
we are the poor scallywags who are tasked with overseeing this body. I assume that means we kind of have to guard it, and probably we're going to be the ones who are going to lug it to where it's supposed to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've established the captain doesn't think much of us.
As in all good pirate crews.
Yes.
Okay, so we've established a starting scene now.
Yes.
So now do we want some kind of conflict to come in? Like, does something happen during the night while we're watching this body? Is that something that we might just use Mythic to roll on? Or what would your approach be at this point?
Okay, so for the deconstructed thing, I just want to make a point that I've got page 10 on there. That is our first adventure element. When you do create an adventure element, we're also going to build an adventure meaning list, which is basically a meaning table customized to this adventure. The idea with that is that the further you get into the adventure will generate its own meaning list, which will later create events that relate to things that have already happened. This is the system's way of building some internal consistency into the adventure as we go, so it's not just completely random. Mm-hmm. So for instance, like, what's a word that would fit this situation? Like body?
Yeah, or curse.
Duty, curse. Want to say curse? Let's do that. That's good. I like that. Curse.
So you're just, at this point, we're just picking a word that seems prominent or that jumps out to us and adding that to the list.
Yes. So I just put it in there. So this is the beginning of a table.
Excellent.
Okay, so we have our first scene. I would just say we just play this out like as a mythic scene. Mm-hmm. We are on our pirate ship. We're guarding Malachi's body on this voyage to dispose of it. And I would say for this first scene, we do stuff like establish where we're at, what's going on, the state of the ship, that kind of thing, which can be answered through fake questions or whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then maybe in order to put some action in, we're going about our daily tasks of what we have to do on the ship, you know?
Yes. And how other pirates may think of us or treat us. We had such bad nights last night that I can't imagine we're going to have very good duties today.
No, in fact, I'm pretty happy that we are only tasked with hanging around in this room guarding a dead body for the night so we can work on the hangover without too much activity.
Well, you know, my character is not too bummed out about this. I've got all those wives I just married and really need to get out of port, and you owe some money, so we need to get out of town anyway. Exactly.
So we're quite happy to be here. And then could we perhaps roll up something like, does something happen in the night?
Ooh, I like that. Let's do that. Do you want to just make a meaning table roll out of that?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's do an action meaning table and see what we get. We're just going to assume something happens during the night, right?
Okay. What happens during the night?
What happens during the night? All right. Assist elements.
Okay.
Do you have an interpretation for that?
I mean, my first thought was that some other very unliked, smelly scoundrel comes down and says, "Hey, why don't I relieve you of your duty for a bit so you can go out and have a few rums with the boys and girl pirates out there," and he's requesting pretty hard that maybe he wants to take over a little bit.
Oh gosh, okay. Let's go with that. I'm fine with that. Let's going up on deck and getting some fresh air and maybe a drink or two.
Yeah, I mean the hangover is starting to get to the point where you're getting thirsty again. So it can't hurt. I mean, yeah, the captain said, whatever you do, don't leave this ship. He didn't say don't leave the cabin, technically.
That's
so
true.
Let's go up and have a couple of drinks then.
Don't really know why that pirate really wants to be with the body, but maybe we don't want to inquire.
Don't want to ask too many questions with these pirates, I think. Okay.
I'm up on deck. I'm going to ask a fake question here. Since the captain clearly had kind of an attitude toward us, and the body protecting job was kind of lowly, I'm going to ask, do we get any flack from our fellow pirates? Like, I'm getting the feeling that our characters aren't exactly well thought of.
Mm-hmm.
So
Can't
let's
imagine
just say
why.
I'm going to give that odds of likely.
Mm-hmm.
All right, 65% chance. Oh, I got a 96, which means no, exceptional no. They actually treat us quite well. I think maybe there's some sympathy there.
Yeah, in fact, probably the captain doesn't like us because we're right up there in the eyes of the rest of the crew. And
We're the cool kids.
We're the cool kids, and we think we could do the job better than him. Both of us individually, we wouldn't share the job. But, and that's probably why he doesn't like us that much.
Probably. Okay, well, that's good to see.
So we're up there and we're carousing a little bit and telling the stories of our debaucherous evenings that we had the night before. And then perhaps we go back in some indeterminate amount of time later, and what do we find when we get back?
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Or would you ask, is everything as we left it?
Let's do that. Is everything as we left it? What kind of odds do you want to give that?
We don't know enough about this guy that was down there, and everyone does think pretty highly of us, so let's call it a 50-50.
50-50. Is everything as we left it? Yes.
Okay. So we get back in there, and the body's still there. It seems to be unmoved and untouched, and our pirate friend is passed out on the comfy bed. That's why he came down there, because he'd had too much to drink anyway.
Maybe he was a friend of Malachi's.
Maybe he was a friend of Malachi's. Maybe he just wanted to spend the evening with him. All very lovely stuff, I'm sure. Okay.
What could go wrong? Yeah.
So at this point now, we've had a little trajectory of a little bit of a scene play out, which is sort of establishing our characters, our place within the crew, and establishing a bit who that captain is. And so far, this curse, whatever it was, if it was a curse, hasn't really showed any signs of anything. What is the next thing that you would do to move on to the next scene now?
Sure. And I just like to point out at this stage of it that so far that what you just stated as far as this adventure has really been entirely our creation. We started with the prologue, so we did take some of that as far as transporting the body, but you or I are approaching this cold. Neither of us have any idea how this adventure is actually supposed to begin, right? Who knows?
Or any characters, or any motivation, or anything.
Yeah, like who is Malachi really? And we don't even know I don't even know who's actually telling us, who's supposed to be telling us this. But we've established Malachi is the body. It's cursed. The captain's telling us this. We're on a ship, probably at night or something, sailing off somewhere. So you can see how our narrative has taken inspiration from the book's narrative. We don't even know what the book's narrative is supposed to be. So you can see how the narrative is gone.
Yeah.
But we've got a whole story going here already in only one scene.
This is excellent. Might I point out as well, just in saying that, if we had have rolled one number higher on the D6, the next section is early in the morning while it's still dark. Captain Malachi awakens a few loyal crew. So we have completely changed who Malachi is.
Yes.
And if we were to go on to that section next, we would be assuming that was something that was happening in the past, right? Because we already know that Malachi is dead.
Yeah, probably. That might actually establish how he died or something, or how the curse begins. Or yes. So you can see how this is like, and we're not bound by the original narrative of this. It's kind of freeing.
Yeah. I can see that a useful tool in this might be the willingness to let time go past as well in the story. Have you found that? Like if two things don't connect, then you're like, okay, 3 days later now, or 2 weeks ago, or, that kind of thing.
I'm a big fan of time jumping in my solo adventures. It's a really easy way to, if you hit kind of a dead end, or if you've kind of run out a current line of inquiry, just move it forward a week, 3 days, a year, or whatever, and it opens up all kinds of new possibilities. Yeah,
I mean, think of storytelling in movies or books, You can use those chapter breaks to really jump ahead and solve a lot of those problems, or at least, jump to the next arc that you want to get into.
Right.
Let's do another one. Let's roll on the adventure die again, and let's see how we can connect whatever comes next.
All right. Well, so the way we're supposed to do this.
Oh, sorry. I got overexcited, Tana.
I hate to be that person.
No, please tell me. Please tell me. I didn't finish the article. I was too excited to get playing.
Let's just, for simplicity, let's just keep the chaos factor at 5 for all this. We come up with we test the next expected scene. And if you want, we could do a time jump. We could say several days later on our voyage.
Well, what is the official process as per
You
Tana
treat it
Pigeon?
just like a typical Mythic adventure where you fashion what the next expected scene is, then you test it.
Okay. But we create the scene based on what happened in the last scene.
Yeah, just like a typical Mythic adventure. If we get the expected scene, we play that just like a typical Mythic adventure.
Mm-hmm.
No additional adventure elements are rolled.
Mm-hmm.
If you get altered, though, you roll adventure element from the book. If you get interrupt, you roll an adventure element. And there's a new scene called a crisis scene that if you roll an even number when testing that's over a chaos, you get a crisis element. So let's just see what's an expected scene that happens next.
Okay, so the expected scene is Peter and who are you, Sam? Samuel?
Samuel the Butcher.
The Butcher.
Yes.
Wake up swinging gently in their string cots. Everything is fine. Everything is quiet. We're awake a little earlier than everyone else. And the body is still there, resting peacefully.
Okay, so that's our expected scene. I rolled 9, which means expected, but let's get something more interesting. I want to roll an adventure element. So I roll 3, an altered scene. So an altered scene means we, for this, using the deconstructed adventures, we're going to go with your expected scene, but we're going to roll an adventure element out of the book and add it to the expected scene. So that's the alteration. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to roll a die 10. We're going to add it to our previous 10. I rolled a 1, so we go to page 11.
Okay, so you're adding it to the last point that we were at in the book.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're advancing forward.
So we are now on page 11, which is... Okay.
I rolled a 5, so it's the lower left of the page.
And the lower left of the page, we have a ship that has stats and hit points. So let me read this. The Scourge of Ecclesiasticus tries to close the distance fast. It prefers to try boarding the morning passage and fight hand in hand versus having its undead crew try to clumsily man its 4 cannons.
All right. So I take my interpretation of that is, as you say, we're waking up the next morning, and I'm thinking we were waking up to the sound of cannon fire to perhaps go up deck and find that our captain has spied another ship and decided to take this as an opportunity to attack it. I think we ignore the end. I want to ignore the undead part, but I'm thinking our ship is the Scourge of Ecclesiasticus, and we are attacking a ship called the Morning Passage. He sees an opportunity, a pirating opportunity in this voyage.
Yeah. And to just to show how different this could be, my assumption with the altered scene was that the captain is still gone. We wake up to being attacked by the Scourge of Ecclesiasticus with the undead crew who are trying to reclaim the cursed Malachi.
That's good.
So it could go either way. But that is so fantastic. I think that really shows how different this could be. And surely nothing to do with the actual adventure.
I know. Who knows what the actual adventure is? Okay, so we're the Morning Passage. Yeah, Scourge of Ecclesiasticus. That sounds like a cursed ship, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, an undead manned cursed ship is attacking our poor beleaguered pirate ship. Okay.
And so then we could go into a combat. Like we could look up the ship combat rules here, even without knowing this game. You know, we could look up the ship combat rules and we could get into a proper ship combat here, and either succeed and fight off the undead crew, or fail and have them kidnap or steal or reclaim the cursed body of Malachi to our detriment.
You know, this whole thing with this body and how everyone seems to want it, this is starting to feel like a pirate Borg version of Weekend at Bernie's or something. I even feel like we're going to end up picking this body and running with it, you know? Like.
Yeah, got to get it out of there. Because everyone must want it, so it's clearly valuable or something, you know? We can probably sell it to the highest bidder. So I think that gives a really good a really good example of how you can use this. And if I can share my experience, having never done this method before, I found that this, like using a picture or a piece of text, but not knowing you don't have to trust it to the letter, for example, I found that it really sparked my imagination, if not just as easily, then more easily than pulling two words and trying to make them fit in. I mean, maybe we just got lucky with these couple of things here, but I found that a really interesting and creative way to do that thing that I love doing in solo role-playing, the thing that makes it special to me, which is seeing what happens in my brain when these ideas spark and experiencing the stories come out unexpectedly. That to me, that's the magic of it.
Yes, I totally agree. And like I said earlier before, when like with subverting the known approach and how I'd feel this tug between a knowing, like being drawn into the adventure or doing my own thing, doing it this way with deconstructing it, to me at least, totally does away with that. I don't feel any tug of war. As you said, it's like we're just hopping on a detail in the book. We can either go with it or not, or how it inspires us or whatever. But I don't feel that that kind of distraction of being drawn to the book's narrative. Removing that narrative, to me, is very freeing.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I think because you're playing within a curated sandpit then at this point, right? You don't end up in those situations that I think a lot of solo role players can get in, where they get given an oracle prompt which just doesn't make sense to them at that moment for that situation, and then they're thinking, well, should I re-roll it? I don't really want to do that. It feels like cheating. How am I going to make this work? How do I have to make this work? And it's those hold up points that I think really hurt people as they're trying to get started and trying to learn about this hobby. You find yourself sitting there frozen, you don't know what to do, and then all of a sudden it's not fun.
Right.
And
right.
With my very limited experiences of exactly 2 dice rolls on this published adventure, it seems to me that, or I can really see that more often, the fact that the sandbox you are playing in is contained and it is all related to each other in some way, that maybe those connections that you can make in your brain then are a little safer, for want of a better word.
I think you're right. Yeah. And which is really how like Mythic's meaning tables function. It's very similar to that, where it's very vague information. It's vague and specific at the same time. This is kind of that same thing, and it just sparks the imagination.
Yeah. I love it. I'm now excited to play Pirate Borg because I've never done ship combat in a game, and man, do I want to. And I know there is ship combat. Oh, look. I mean, this book is just beautiful. Well, this may very well be the first published adventure that I try for real with the deconstruct the known method. I think this is very exciting. I think you've provided enough tools here and enough rules that it's something that you can follow the guideline of and naturally be able to do this. I found it really difficult reading things like DM Yourself when it says, okay, all you have to do is not really read anything, or just skim over it and don't really look at stuff. That seems like a skill that you have to learn. Right. Whereas in this method, you have a set of instructions to follow.
Yeah, and it's really just playing a standard Mythic game with this new edition of treating the book like a meaning table, and adding one more scene element or one more scene structure with the crisis scenes, which we didn't get to, but it's basically just another way to roll. Use the source material. So you're choosing words for each of these adventure elements that to you mean like what our adventure is about. Eventually we'll start rolling on that table and mixing those words into more elements for the adventure. So the more we draw from the book, the more we build this table. The table now is like distilling elements from the book that are specific to our adventure. And then we start going more and more to that table, so that the adventure as it goes gets more and more cohesive. So you can kind of see, how it draws it out. I'd just like to add also that even though this is meant for adventure modules, you can use the same method for any book. Like you could use the Pirate Borg core book itself and use that.
Right.
So Like it doesn't have to be an adventure module. It can be anything.
So I roll up and I come to the page of ship combat, and then it's, okay, great, let's learn about ship combat, and we're in one.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a way to get the flavor out of whatever book it is, whether it's an adventure book or even a non-role-playing book, like a Encyclopedia of Pirates or something. It doesn't even have to be an RPG book.
I think you may have invented the best way to learn a role-playing game. Learn the rules by playing through the book with the deconstruct, the known method.
Well, I should say that somewhere around Mythic Magazine number 24, that is actually an article.
Is it?
How to use Mythic to learn a role-playing game, and it's very similar to this. But yeah, you're right.
I've got a lot of catching up to do. Speaking of Mythic Magazine, would you tell our listeners... I already know, I'm very pleased. I'm sad this conversation is ending because we're getting low on time, but I'm very pleased that we definitely have more to talk about and more episodes in our future, I'm sure, and I hope. But can you tell people a little bit about Mythic Magazine and how they can follow it, how they can follow you, and how they can get things like these lists that you've been using for this particular method?
Sure. Mythic Magazine is an e-zine I put out monthly that is basically a source book for Mythic and the Crafter books. Each issue has 2 articles, which is usually a new rule system or something new, some new mechanic or something like that, just like this Deconstructing Adventures. And you can find it on my Patreon or at Drive-Thru RPG. And any of these links can be found by going to my website at wordmillgames.com. There's also a resource section on my site that has downloads for, pages from the books and whatnot. I don't have a lot on there. I have the most common ones. If there's a document that you were looking for that's not on there, I'm really open to people emailing me, and then I'll make it and post it. So I kind of post them as people ask for them.
That's really wonderful. That closeness with the community is one of the fantastic things about this hobby. I know some of my Patreons who have been deep in discussion about this published adventure stuff will ask me straight away, where do I find the printouts that we just used today? So they're on the website then, are they? What's it called?
These are not on the download section yet. Mm-hmm. I should add them now. You'd have to get them out of the PDF of the magazine. Issue number, was it 50 or 51?
50.
50. Yeah, they're in there. So if you get the magazine, you can get them from there. I will, though. I'll go ahead and post these on my download site, though. Give me a couple of days because I'll need to get them in there. But
excellent.
Yes,
but I highly recommend everyone either become a patron, and if you're a patron, do you get access to all the magazines? How does your Patreon work?
You have access to the current 3 issues. So it'd be like 52, 51, 50. So it's always the last 3 issues.
Mm-hmm. Or you can go and buy individual issues on Drive-Thru, as you said.
Yes. And every 6 months, I make a compilation of all 6. Some people prefer to wait for the compilations instead of getting individual issues. It's cuts the price in half, and you get a big 250-page book of, magazine content.
Fantastic. So I highly recommend, if you're interested in trying out this system, you can wait a couple of days and get the sheet on the download section. That won't tell you everything about how to do it. So I highly recommend you either go and purchase issue number 50 of it or become a patron, and then you can get the last 3 issues. Speaking of Patreon, I now have a Patreon where I do some extra episodes where we continue the stories of the games that I pull off the shelf and get to the table. But another idea I had buzzing around is, because as part of that membership you get access to our little Discord community, I wanted to get some celebrity people to come in on the Discord just for a day, maybe a 24-hour period, where they are there for you to talk to, answer questions, and just get to know a little bit for a day before we kick them out again. And I am happy to announce that Tana has agreed to be the first celebrity to come into the Discord over on the Patreon. We're not sure yet when that's going to be. We'll work that out. But if you are interested, you can head over to Patreon/Solo RolePlayers. You can join for free there, and I'll put a post there about how it's going to work with the Discord guest appearance. Thank you so much, Tana, for coming on the show again. I can't wait to have another excuse to bring you on again. I will have to start reading
catching up on all those Mythic Magazine. Mythic Magazine. Thank you. This was a blast. And anytime you want me on your show, this is so much fun. I'm always game.
Fantastic. I will definitely hold you to that. Until we meet again, Tana, I've been your host, PJ, on the Solo RolePlayers Podcast, and we'll catch you next time when we are getting a game off the shelf, interviewing another fantastic person in the Solo RolePlayers community, or some other idea that I haven't even thought of yet. We'll see you then. Bye.
Bye-bye.